There's absolutely no reason why you do that.
Did you hear me use that dirty language earlier? That thing, for no reason, keeps falling. But there. I feel a little better. Let's get started with our book. We're already... Let's get started. Amor. It wasn't quite the romance she would later make it out to be. A couple of talks, a walk on the beach while the rest of the class was having a picnic, and before she knew it, she was sneaking into a closet with him after school, and he was slipping it to her something terrible. Let's just say that she finally understood why the other boys had given him the nickname Jack the Ripio. He had what even she knew to be an enormous penis, a Shiva-sized lingam, a destroyer of worlds. And the whole time she thought they'd been calling him Jack the Ripper. Duh. Later, after she'd been with the gangster, she would realize how little respect Pujols had for her. But since she had nothing to compare it to at the time, she assumed fucking was supposed to feel like she was being run through with a cutlass. The first time she was scared shitless and it hurt bad. 40-10. I don't know what that means exactly. But nothing could obliterate the feeling she had that finally she was on her way, the sense of a journey starting, of a first step taken, of the beginning of something big. Write down a little bit. Afterward, she tried to embrace him, to touch his silken hair, but he shook off her caresses. Hurry up and get dressed. If we get caught, my ass will be in the fire. Which was funny because that's exactly how her ass felt. For about a month, they scrumped in various isolated corners of the school until the day a teacher, acting on an anonymous tip from a member of the student body, surprised the undercover couple in flagrant delicto in a broom closet. Flagrante delicto. Just imagine Bali buck naked, her vast scar like nothing anybody had seen before, and Jack with his pants puddled around his ankles. The scandal. Remember the time and the place, Bonnie in the late 50s. Factor in that Jack Pujols was the #1 son of the Blessed B clan, one of Bonnie's most venerable and filthy rich families. Factor in that he'd been caught not with one of his own class, though that might have also been a problem, but with the scholarship girl, una prieta to boot. The fucking of poor prietas was considered standard operating procedure for elites just as long as it was kept on the do low, which is elsewhere called the Strom-Thurmond maneuver. He was a senator for how many years? Or a rep, one of the two. Till he died or almost died, 98, 92, something like that. Pujols, of course, blamed Bealey for everything. Sat in the office of the rector and explained in great detail how she had seduced him. It wasn't me, he insisted. It was her. The real scandal, however, was that Pujols was actually engaged to that girlfriend of his, the half-in-the-grave Rebecca Brito, herself a member of Bonnie's other powerful family, the R. And you better believe Jack getting caught in a closet with una prieta kebabbed any future promise of matrimony. Her family very particular about their Christian reputation. Pujols' old man was so infuriated, humiliated, that he started beating the boy as soon as he laid hands on him, and within the week had shipped him off to military school in Puerto Rico, where he would, in the colonel's words, learn the meaning of duty. Bealey never saw him again, except in the Listín Diario, and by then they were both in their 40s. Pujols might have been a bitch-ass rat, but Beely's reaction was one for the history books. Not only was our girl not embarrassed by what had happened, even after being shaken down by the rector and the nun and the janitor, a holy triple team, she absolutely refused to profess her guilt. If she had rotated her head around 360 degrees and vomited green pea soup, it would have caused only slightly less of an uproar. In typical hard-headed Beely fashion, our girl insisted that she'd done nothing wrong, that, in fact, she was well within her rights. I'm allowed to do anything I want, Beely said stubbornly, with my husband. Pujols, it seemed, had promised Belicia that they would be married as soon as they'd both finished high school, and Beely had believed him, hook, line, and sinker. Hard to square her credulity with the hard-nosed, no-nonsense, feminine matador I'd come to know, but one must remember she was young and in love. Talk about fantasist. The girl sincerely believed that Jack would be true. The good teachers at Reldentor never squeezed anything close to a mea culpa from the girl. She kept shaking her head, as stubborn as the laws of the universe themselves. No, 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 no. Mattered. That's not that it mattered in the end. Belicia's tenure at the school was over, and so were La Inca's dreams of recreating in Beely her father's genius, his magis, his excellence in all things. In any other family, such a thing would have meant the beating of Beely to within an inch of her life, beating her straight into the hospital with no delay, and then once she was better, beating her again and putting her back in the hospital. But La Inca was not that kind of a parent. La Inca, you see, was a serious woman, an upstanding woman, one of the best of her class, but she was incapable of punishing the girl physically. Can't call it a hitch in the universe, call it mental illness, but La Inca just couldn't do it. Not then, not ever. All she could do was wave her arms in the air and hurl laments. How could this have happened? La Inca demanded. How? How? He was going to marry me, Beely cried. We were going to have children. Are you insane? La Inca roared. Hija, have you lost your mind? Took a while for shit to calm down. The neighbors loving the whole thing. I told you that Blackie was good for nothing, but eventually things did, and only then did La Inca convoke a special session of our girl's future. First, La Inca gave Beely tongue-lashing number 500 million and 5, excoriating her poor judgment, her poor morals, her poor everything. And only when those preliminaries were good and settled did La Inca lay down the law. You are returning to school, not to El Renditor, but somewhere nearly as good. Padre Bellini. And Beely, her eyes still swollen from Jack loss, laughed. I'm not going back to school, not ever. Had she forgotten the suffering that she had endured in her lost years in the pursuit of education, the costs, the terrible scars on her back, the burning? Perhaps she had. Perhaps the prerogatives of this new age had rendered the vows of the old irrelevant. However, during those tumultuous post-explosive weeks, while she'd been writhing in her bed over the loss of her husband, our girl had been rocked by instances of stupendous turbidity. A first lesson in the fragility of love and the preternatural cowardice of men. And out of this disillusionment and turmoil sprang Beely's first adult oath, one that would follow her into adulthood, to the States and beyond. I will not serve. Never again would she allow any lead other than her own. Not the rector's, not the nuns, not La Inca's, not her poor dead parents. Only me, she whispered. Me. This oath did not much to rally her. This oath did much to rally her. Not long after the back-to-school shutdown, Beely put on one of La Inca's dresses, was literally bursting in it, and caught a ride down to the Park Central. This was not a huge trip, but still, for a girl like Beely, it was a precursor of things to come. When she returned to the house in late afternoon, she announced, "I have a job," La Inca snorted. "I guess the cabarets are always hiring." It was not a cabaret. Beely might have been a puta major in the cosmology of her neighbors, but a cuero she was not. No, she had landed a job as a waitress at a restaurant on the Park. The owner, the stout, well-dressed Chinese by the name of Wan Ten, had not exactly needed anyone. In fact, he didn't know if he needed himself. Business terrible, he lamented. Too much politics. Politics bad for everything but politicians. No excess money and already many impossible employees. But Beely was not willing to be rejected. "There's a lot I can do." She pinched her shoulder blades to emphasize her assets. But Beely was not willing to be which for a man any less righteous would have been an open invitation, but Juan simply sighed. "No, obligated, be without shame. We try you up. Probationary period, can't promises build. Political conditions give promises no hospitality. What's my salary?" "Salary? No salary. You a waitress, you tips." "How much are they?" Once again, the glumness. "It is without certainty." "I don't understand." His brother Jose's bloodshot eyes glanced up from the sports section. "What my brother is saying is that it all depends." And here's La Inca shaking her head. "A waitress. But hija, you're a baker's daughter. You don't know the first thing about waitressing." La Inca assumed that because Beely had of late not shown any enthusiasm for the bakery or school or for cleaning, she devolved into a zangana. But she'd forgotten that our girl had been a criada in her first life. For half her years, she'd known nothing but work. La Inca predicted that Beely would call it quits within a couple months, but Beely never did. On the job, our girl, in fact, showed her quality. She was never late, never malingered, worked her sizable ass off. Heck, she liked the job. It was not exactly President of the Republic, but for a 14-year-old who wanted out of the house, it paid and kept her in the world while she waited for her glorious future to materialize. 18 months she worked at the Palacio Peking, originally called El Tesoro de Blanc, in honor of Admirals True, but never reached destination. But the brothers then, the last name, had changed it when they learned that Admiral's name was a Fuku. Chinese know like curses, one had said. She would always say she came of an age in the restaurant, and in some ways she did. She learned to beat men at dominoes and proved herself so responsible that the brothers then could leave her in charge of the cook and the other waitstaff while they slipped out to fish and visit their thick-legged girlfriends. In later years, Beely would lament that she had ever lost touch with her chinos. "They were so good to me," she moaned to Oscar and Lola. "Nothing like your worthless esponja of a father, Juan, a melancholic gambler who waxed about Shanghai as though it were a love poem sung by a beautiful woman you love but cannot have. Juan, the short-sighted romantic whose girlfriends robbed him blind who never mastered Spanish, though in later years when he was living in Skokie, Illinois, he would yell at his Americanized grandchildren in his guttural Spanish, and they laughed at him thinking it Chinese. Juan, who taught Beely how to play dominoes and whose only fundamentalism was his bulletproof optimism. If only Admiral come to our restaurant first, imagine the trouble that could be avoided. Sweating gentle Juan, who would have lost the restaurant if not for his older brother, Jose, the enigmatic, who hovered at the periphery with all the measure of a Cyclone. Jose, the bravo, the guapo, his wife and children dead by warlord in the 30s. Jose, who protected the restaurant and the rooms above with an implacable ferocity. Jose, whose grief had extracted from his body all softness, idle chatter, and hope. He never seemed to approve of Beely or any of the other employees, but since she alone wasn't scared of him, I'm almost as tall as you are. He reciprocated by giving her practical instructions. You want to be a useless woman all your life? Like how to hammer nails, fix electrical outlets, cook chow fun, and drive a car? All would come in good use when she became the Empress of Diaspora. Jose would acquit himself bravely in the revolution fighting. I must regretfully report against the Pueblo, and would die in 1976 in Atlanta, cancer of the pancreas, crying out his wife's name, which the nurses confused for more Chinese gobbledygook. Extra emphasis in their minds on the gook. And then there was Lillian, the other waitress, a squat rice tub whose rancor against the world turned to glee only when humanity exceeded in its venality, brutality, and mendacity even her own expectations. She didn't take to Beely at first, thought her competition, but eventually would treat Beely more or less with courtesy. She was the first woman our girl met who read the paper. Her son's bibliomania would remind her always of Lillian. How's the world keeping? Beely asked her. Jodido was always her answer. And Indian Benny, a quiet, meticulous waiter who had the sad airs of a man long accustomed to the spectacular demolition of dreams. Rumor at the restaurant had it that Indian Benny was married to a huge, lusty Azwana who regularly put him on the street so that she could bunk some new sweetmeat. The only time Indian Benny was known to smile was when he beat Jose at dominoes. The two were consummate tile slingers and, of course, bitter rivals. He, too, would fight in the revolution for the home team, and it was said that throughout the summer of our national liberation, Indian Benny never stopped smiling. Even after a Marine sniper cavitated his brains over his entire command, he didn't stop. And what about the cook? Marco Antonio, a one-legged, no-ear grotesque straight out of Gormenghast. His explanation for his appearance, I had an accident. His bag was an almost fanatical distrust of Ciabanos, whose regional pride he was convinced masked imperial ambitions on a Haitian level. They want to seize the republic. I'm telling you, Cristiano, they want to start their own country. The whole day she dealt with hombres of all stripes, and it was here Beely perfected her rough-spun, salt of the earth bonhomie. As you might imagine, everybody was in love with her, including her co-workers, but Jose had warned them off. Touch her and I'll put your guts out your culo. You must be joking, Marco Antonio said in his defense. I couldn't climb that mountain even with 2 legs. The customer's attention was exhilarating, and she in turn gave the boy something that most men can never get enough of: ribbing, salacious mothering from an attractive woman. Still plenty of niggers in Bonnie, old customers who remember her with great fondness. La Inca, of course, was anguished by Beely's fall from Princesa to Mesera. What is happening to the world? At home, the two rarely spoke anymore. La Inca tried to talk, but Beely wouldn't listen, and for her part, La Inca filled the silence with prayer, trying to summon a miracle that would transform Beely back into a dutiful daughter. As fate would have it, once Beely had slipped her grasp, not even God had enough caracal to bring her back. Every now and then La Inca would appear at the restaurant. She'd sit alone, erect as a lectern, all in black, and between sips of tea would watch the girl with a mournful intensity. Perhaps she hoped to shame Beely into returning to Operation Restore House of Cabral, but Beely went about her work with customary zeal. It must have dismayed La Inca to see how drastically her daughter was changing, for Beely, the girl who never used to speak in public, who could be still as no, displayed a pallatio peaking, a roncateur's gift for palavir that delighted a great many of all male clientele. Those of you who have stood at the corner of 142nd and Broadway can guess what it was she spoke. The blunt, irreverent cant of the pueblo that gives all Dominicanos cultos nightmares on their 400 thread count sheets, and that La Inca had assumed had perished along with Beely's first life in outer Azua. But here it was so alive, it was like it had never left. Hoy, Paraguayo, y que paso con ese esposa tuya? Gordo, no me digas que tú todavía tienes hambre. Eventually, there came a moment when she'd pause at La Inca's table. Do you want anything else? Only that you would return to school, mija. Sorry, Beely picked up her taza and wiped the table in one perfunctory motion. We stopped serving pendejada last week. And then La Inca paid her quarter and was gone, and a great weight lifted off Beely, proof that she'd done the right thing. In those 18 months, she learned a great deal about herself. She learned that despite all her dreams to be the most beautiful woman in the world, to have the brothers jumping out of windows in her wake, when Belicia Cabral fell in love, she stayed in love. Despite the trove of men, handsome, plain, and ugly, who marched into the street intent on winning her hand in marriage, or at least in fuckage, she never had a thought for anyone but Jack Pujols. Turns out that in her heart, our girl was more Penelope than whore of Babylon. Of course, La Inca, who witnessed the parade of men muddying her doorstep, would not have agreed. Beely often had dreams where Jack returned from military school, dreams where he'd be waiting for her at the job, spilled out at one of the tables like a beautiful bag of swag, a grin on his magnificent face, his eyes of Atlantis on her at last, only on her. I came back for you, mi amor. I came back. Our girlfriend learned that even to a cooch like Jack Pujols, she was true. That reminds me of me, and it reminds me of so many women, right? Oh dear goodness gracious, we were not whores, and we never wanted to be that. We just wanted to be somebody's one true love. That's all we ever wanted, to be somebody's one true love. True that. But that didn't mean she reclused herself entirely from the world of men. For all her fidelity, she would never be a sister who liked being without male attention. Even in this rough period, Beely had her princess-in-waiting brothers willing to brave the barbed-wired minefields of her affections in the hopes that beyond the cruel midden Elysium might await. The poor deluded chumps. The gangster would have her every which way, but these poor sapos who came before the gangster, they were lucky to get an abrazo. Let us summon back from the abyss two sapos in particular. The first dealer, bald, white, and smiling, a regular Hippolito Mejia, but suave and cavalier, and so enamored of North American baseball that he risked life and limb to listen to games on a contraband shortwave radio. He believed in baseball with the fervor of an adolescent, and believed also that in the future Dominicans would storm the major leagues and compete with the Mantles and the Marises of the world. Marichal is only the beginning, he predicted, of a reconquista. You're crazy, Beely said, mocking him and his jueguito. In an inspired stroke of counter-programming, her other paramour was a student at UASD, one of those city college types who'd been in school 11 years and is always 5 credits shy of a degree. Students today don't mean nah, but in a Latin American whipped into a frenzy by the fall of Arbenz, by the stoning of Nixon, by the guerrillas of Sierra Maestra, by the endless cynical maneuvering of the Yankee pig dogs, and a Latin America already a year and a half into the decade of the guerrilla, a student was something else altogether, an agent for change, a vibrating quantum string in the staid Newtonian universe. Such a student was Archimedes. He also listened to the shortwave, but not for Dodgers scores. What he risked his life for was the news leaking out of Havana, news of the future. Archimedes was therefore a student, the son of a zapatero and a midwife, a tirapiedra and a quemagama for life. Being a student wasn't a joke, not with Trujillo and Johnny Abbas scooping up everybody following the foiled Cuban invasion in 1959. So here is a footnote, and my eyes aren't doing too well, and I did find my magnifying glass, so I'm going to go get my magnifying glass, and I'll be right back to read that footnote. Okay, this is after the name Johnny Abbas, right? So he is Trujillo and Johnny Abbas, scooping up everybody following the foiled Cuban invasion of 1959. Johnny Abbas Garcia, my maiden name, was one of Trujillo's beloved Morgul lords, chief of the dreaded and all-powerful secret police, SIM. Abbas was considered the torturer of the Dominican people ever to have lived. Abbas was considered the greatest torturer of the Dominican people ever to have lived. An enthusiast of Chinese torture techniques, Abbas was rumored to have in his employ a dwarf who would crush prisoners' testicles between his teeth, plotted endlessly against Trujillo's enemies, the killer of many young revolutionaries and students, including the Maribal sisters. At Trujillo's behest, Abbas, I think it's Abbeys, let's write Abbeys, Abbes, Abbeys, organized the plot to assassinate the democratically elected president of Venezuela, Romulo Betancourt. Betancourt and Tizilo were old enemies, beefing since the 40s, when Trujillo's SIMians, so that's a secret police, tried to inject Betancourt with poison on the streets of Havana. The second attempt worked no better than the first. The bomb packed into a green Olds blew the presidential Cadillac clean out of the Caracas, slew the driver and a bystander, but failed to kill Betancourt. Now that's really gangster. Venezuelanos don't ever say we don't have history together. It's not just the novelas that we share or the fact that so many of us flooded your shores to work in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Our dictator tried to slay your president. After Trujillo's death, Abbeys was named consul to Japan just to get him out of the country, and ended up working for that other, nearly as loyal to Papa Doc as he was to Trujillo. After an attempted double cross, Papa Doc shot Abbeys and his family and then blew their fucking house up. I think P. Daddy knew exactly what kind of creature he was dealing with. No Dominican believes that Abe's died in that blast. He is said to still be out there in the world, waiting for the next coming of El Jefe, when he too will rise from the shadow. Interesting. Wasn't a day that passed that his life wasn't in danger, and he had no fixed address, appeared in Beely's day with no warning. Archie, as he was known, had an immediate head of hair, and Hector Laveau glasses and the intensity of a South Beach dietitian. Reviled the North Americans for their silent invasion of the Dominican Republic and Dominicans for their annexationist subservience to the North. Guacanagari has cursed us all that his most beloved ideologues were a couple of Germans who never met a nigger they liked was beside the point. Both of these dudes Beely played hard, visited them at their digs and at the dealership, and dished them their daily recommended allowance of no play. A date couldn't pass without the Fiat dealer begging her for a single grope. Just let me touch them with the back of my hand, he mewed. But nearly every time she picked him off in a fielder's choice. Archimedes, when rebuffed, at least showed some class. He didn't pout and mutter, "What the hell am I wasting my money for?" He preferred to stay philosophical. "The revolution is not made in a day," he'd say ruefully, and then kick back and entertain her with some stories about dodging the secret police. Even to a chooch like Jack Poogles, she was true. Yes, but eventually she did get over him. A romantic she was, but not a pendeja. When she finally came to, however, things had turned dicey, to say the least. The country was in an uproar after the failed invasion of 1959, and an underground conspiracy of youth had been uncovered, and everywhere young people were being arrested and tortured and killed. Politics once spat, staring at all the empty tables. Politics. Jose didn't offer comment. He simply cleaned his Smith & Wesson in the privacy of his upstairs room. "I don't know if I'll make it out of this one," Archimedes said in a barefaced attempt to cage a pity fuck. "You'll be fine," Beely snorted, pushing off his embrace. She was right in the end, but he was one of the few who made it through with his balls unfried. Archie survives into the present, and when I drive through the capital with my man Pedro, I occasionally spot his grill on campaign posters for one of the radical splinter parties whose role platform is to bring electricity back to the Dominican Republic. Pedro snorts, "Ese ladrón no va pa ningún lado." In February, Lillian had to quit the job and return to her Campro to care for her ailing mother, a senora who Lillian claimed had never given a damn for her well-being. But it is the fate of women everywhere to be miserable always, Lillian declared, and then she was gone, and only the cheap freebie calendar she liked marking off remained. A week later, the brothers then hired a replacement, a new girl, Constantina, in her 20s, sunny and amiable, whose cuerpo was all pipa and no culo, a mujer alegre, in the parlance of the period. More than once, Constantina arrived to lunch straight from a night of partying, smelling of whiskey and stale cigarettes. "Muchacha, you wouldn't believe el lío en que me metí anoche." She was disarmingly chill and could curse the black off a crow, and perhaps recognizing a kindred spirit alone in the world, took an immediate liking to our girl. "Mi hermanita," she called Beely, the most beautiful girl. You're proof that God is Dominican. Constantina was the person who finally pried the sad ballad of Jack Pujos out of her. Her advice? Forget the hijo de la porra that come huevo. Every desgraciado who walks in here is in love with you. You could have the whole maldito world if you wanted. The world. It was what she desired with her entire heart. But how could she achieve it? She watched the flow of traffic past the park and did not know. One day, in a burbuja of girlish impulse, they finished work early and, taking their earnings to the Spaniards down the street, bought a pair of matching dresses. Now you look candela, Constantina said approvingly. So what you going to do now? Beely asked, a crooked smile. Me, I'm going to Hollywood for a dance. I have un bueno amigo working in the door, and from what I hear, there'll be a holy assembly line of rich men with nothing to do but adore me. I see. She shivered her hands down the slopes of her hips. Then she stopped the show. Why does the private school princess actually want to come along? Beely thought about it a moment. Why does the private school princess actually want to come along? Beely thought about it a moment. Thought about La Inca waiting for her at home. Thought about the heartbreak that she was beginning to fade in her. Yes, I want to go. There it was. Decision that changed everything. Or as she broke it down to Lola in her last days, all I wanted was to dance. What I got instead was esto, she said, opening her arms to encompass the hospital, her children, her cancer, America. Esto is this. All I got is this. Opening her arms to encompass the hospital, her children, her cancer, and America. Okay, El Hollywood is the next section of chapter 3. Woo! We got some reading done, didn't we? This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Thanks for joining me here in the reading room. I'm the teacher. You have been enjoying our book, The Wondrous Adventures of Oscar Wu, in the classroom. Thanks.